Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis. Welcome to this DC TV series about the network of global corporate control. Today's segment is live and is about corruption in our money system and how we're cleaning up this corruption. Money plays a central role in our society, and a corrupt money system means that there's a corruption everywhere. Thanks to DC TV, Carmen Stanley, studio producer, Maurice Jackson, audio and prompter, and Jamie Fain, she's the floor director tonight. Fortunately, at the end of World War II, a great man from the Philippines named Jose Rizal became the superior general of the Society of Jesus, that is, the Jesuits. Jose Rizal became the Black Pope, and Rizal and his lawyer, Ferdinand Marcos, signed over the wealth of the world to the 189 ministers of finance and development on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund for the benefit of humanity in a trust called the Global Debt Facility. I vote the shares of the United States on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. I am also representing the people of the United States until the Constitution of 1789 goes back into force and effect. And there was a question for me. Other than following the events as they unfold and telling others about what is happening, is there anything else we can do to help? And the answer is, first of all, thank you for that question. There are two important things that you mentioned, and I also want you to form small groups like book clubs and fight corruption in your towns and villages. These small groups are going to steer us through the global currency reset and keep you on track and help you to figure out what's really going on, as opposed to the false reality that you're surrounded with from the banking cartel. These groups, because they include people that know you really well, are going to help you figure out when you're being swayed by the pervasive scalar wave and EMF military technology. Then you need to make sure that the merchants in your villages and towns will accept local currency. I have put a database together to help guide you with forming local currency in your villages and towns, but any system your village and town will adopt is great. YouTube is owned by Google, and Google was created by the banking cartel. And they erased my comment on the YouTube, but I just went back and I also saw that YouTube erased the question for good measure. You see the question and response that YouTube erased as a screenshot on the teleprompter that I publish. The explanations that the banking cartel keeps on making to try and cover up their existence are not working anymore. More and more people are convinced that the banking cartel is real. The banking cartel even tried erasing humankind's real history. That is what the Chronologia project at Moscow State University is all about. What a nerve, lying to us about our history when there is good evidence that real history is very different from the fake version. Naturally, the banking cartel broke the links of the videos that explain how real history is different from the fake version. And so I put those links on the teleprompter for you. Just think, cover up of corruption, and you know what reality is. If you have a hard time figuring out what I mean, remember the explanation that there was only one bullet that killed John F. Kennedy. And let me tell you what John F. Kennedy was saying 7 days before his assassination. He said, "I must confess, from my position in this high and noble office, that the anarchists were correct all along. The government is illegitimate, and I intend to tell the American people about this." That was 7 days before he was assassinated. Then, remember the official explanation about the fall of the Twin Towers on 9/11/2001 and how scientists are now telling us that the steel structure of the buildings would not have melted and fallen suddenly into the footprint of the buildings in dust, even if they were really hit by actual airplanes, which they were not. We are living in interesting times. I am an ordinary person who is extraordinarily stubborn, and I was sitting in the right place at the right time. That is the legal department of the World Bank. I saw corruption, and I used the tools that came to me at the World Bank, including the National War College's power transition model. And I started working with all of the people I could find to fight the corruption that was surrounding us. This has been a long battle going on 20 years. I've kept good records, and the timeline of the various battles is more proof that we are in the global currency reset, and also that I'm telling you the truth. More and more people are learning this truth, which can be seen on the internet, even though the banking cartel is falsifying the counters. I like to use the Wizard of Oz as an analogy because Frank Baum's fairy tale is actually an allegory, and the yellow brick road is all about the important role of gold in the global currency reset. As I mentioned to you in an early segment about gold, monoatomic gold tells us something important about reality. And there's a clip that I'd like to show you now. Program. One other final thought that I'd like to leave you with before I conclude the program is about a new form of gold called monoatomic gold. In the late 1970s, an Arizona farmer named David Hudson noticed some very strange materials as he was doing some gold mining on his land. Hudson spent several $1 million over the following decade figuring out how to obtain and work with these strange materials. In 1989, David Hudson was granted patents on these materials and methods for obtaining them. Many people are claiming that monoatomic gold, also known as white powder gold, holds the key to health, energy, and longevity. What is monoatomic gold? Monoatomic elements are made of single atoms, not bound to one another. One strange and exotic property of monoatomic gold is that when heated to certain temperatures, it becomes lighter, and then it ultimately disappears in a puff of smoke. So this is very interesting. We have a lot to catch up on, and we're going to be doing that when we're in the middle of the currency reset. And just as the banking cartel has falsified our history, it has also falsified our science. Hidden science can explain where the monoatomic gold has materialized. Part of humanity's job in the global currency reset is going to be to reclaim this hidden knowledge. Black people in America are helping me expose this rot at the top of the government in the District of Columbia. When Donald Trump, that fake agent of the banking cartel, pretending to be the President of the United States, just tries ripping the social fabric of the United States along racial lines, and I'm telling you about the true history of the United States and how much we owe to the Moors. How successful do you think that fake provocateur is going to be? There are many reasons to think that the banking cartel is failing in their effort to destroy the United States. One of the banking cartel's agents is that traitor, General Dunford Jr. Many members of the United States Armed Services understand that the banking cartel replaced the Constitution of the United States of 1789 in 1871. The armed services owe their allegiance to the Constitution of the United States. The members of the armed services at least 70% of them know that General Dunford Jr. is a traitor, that General Dunford has broken his oath of office, and that General Dunford is now bankrupt under a commercial lien, enforceable under the common law. I've been posting evidence of General Dunford Jr.'s treason. The banking cartel's lies are there for everyone to see. This is how I discovered that a link about the United States military and the way the banking cartel invalidated the Constitution of 1789 was broken for actually a third time. These are signs that the banking cartel understands that they are doomed with the good information that we're providing. Here is what the U.S. military has to say about this treason. It's from an email that I received several years ago. And I'm quoting, "I've been helping medias for the past 3 years, Press TV, RT, and several others. And I've been on the front line and have seen things that people never thought existed. I have ties to the militias and military. We have 70% of the United States military on our side." And this was from several years ago. In an editorial in the New York Times, General John Spencer was trying to isolate the U.S. military from social media to shield the traitors like General Dunford from the truth. This has only backfired. The banking cartel helps me write these teleprompters. I just look to see what the banking cartel is trying to hide from you, like a link that I have in the teleprompter, where I was telling the governors of the United States about corruption just before the annual meeting of the World Bank in 2016, which was when the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF approved the global currency reset. And on the 31st of January 2017, I showed you a cover of The Economist in my social media. That's what the bankrupt banking cartel wants you to think is going to happen. Is Donald Trump really sitting on a throne? What kind of throne is he sitting on? Is he trying to bring down the United States? We've already shown significant numbers of people that Donald Trump is illegitimate, that the United States Constitution of 1789 is not in effect, and therefore the Electoral College was unable to elect Donald Trump legitimately. My tweet on January 14, 2017, about a court case showing that the federal courts have no jurisdiction outside of Washington. This was widely distributed over the internet. And I'm providing a link to that case in the teleprompter. I've been telling you that country debt is a scam and that the banking cartel owes us more than we owe them, because the Federal Reserve owes over $2 quadrillion in bonds that are held in the Global Debt Facility. That's the trust that I'm the overseer mandate for. The Global Debt Facility contains the world's wealth, and it is managed by 189 ministers of finance and development on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. I now vote the shares of the United States on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF until the Constitution of 1789 of the U.S. goes back into force and effect. And let me read you a quote from the case that I've been citing. Quote, "Resistance to additional income taxes would be even more widespread if people were aware that 100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt. In other words, all individual income tax revenues are gone before one nickel is spent on the services which taxpayers expect from their government." And that's taken from the Grace Report. And you can see other things. You can see the entire report. I've provided links to that report. I cited the case that I was reading you that quote from, and a lot more, to Neil Gorsuch. I told Judge Gorsuch that if he couldn't explain the lies that are being covered up by the lawyers, he would be bankrupt by the end of the commercial lien process. And this is what I said in my affidavit to Neil Gorsuch. Donald J. Trump has failed to acknowledge that the United States is not operating under the Constitution of 1789, nor has he acknowledged that the United States monetary gold reserves are administered by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund because they're in a trust established at the end of World War II by General Eisenhower and President Truman. Instead, Donald Trump has perpetuated the hoax on the American people, despite having had the opportunity to rectify these falsehoods. Neil M. Gorsuch has accepted the purported nomination to the office as a justice of the Supreme Court by Donald Trump, notwithstanding that Donald Trump has failed to acknowledge that the United States is not operating under the Constitution of 1789. Neil Gorsuch is perpetuating the hoax on the American people and the corrupt business environment in the United States, and has harmed me personally with these lies and falsehoods, as this has prevented me from returning to the World Bank's headquarters and working on the global currency reset agreed to by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF, and returning the Constitution of 1789 of the United States via an Article 5 Constitutional Convention. I'm going to read you what I put in my letter to Neil Gorsuch. I represent the Ministers of Finance and Development on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, who administer the United States monetary gold reserves that were placed in trust at the end of World War II by General Eisenhower and Harold Truman. Although this is only conjecture, I believe that Justice Anton Scalia was murdered to prevent him from disclosing the fact that the United States was secretly being governed by martial law. The United States is currently in interregnum. This is what I said about Justice Scalia's corruption on February 3, 2016, which was 10 days before his sudden death, in refusing to tell the American people that the United States was then being governed by martial law. I also mentioned the corruption in the Supreme Court and posted a picture of Justices Antonin Scalia and Clarence Thomas during my series about the network of global corporate control that was broadcast on DCTV on February 9, 2016. I named the DCTV series after the title of an article about the banking cartel written by three mathematicians, Stefania Vitali, Gladfelder, and this is scrolling too fast. Can you go back, please? Thank you. On February 10, 2016, I told the American Bar Association that lawyers are too corrupt to regulate the legal profession anymore, and that there probably shouldn't be a legal profession. Article 5 of the Constitution of 1789 is the way to measure whether we, the people, have given our consent to the way that we're being governed. When 2/3 of the state legislatures applied to the U.S. Congress for an amendment to the Constitution, there is supposed to be a convention to propose amendments. The state of Wisconsin believed that this threshold was passed in 1929, but the U.S. Congress has refused to do its duty to convene a constitutional convention. Instead, Congress has declared a state of emergency. Because the U.S. Congress has refused to convene the convention, and because the U.S. Congress and the legal profession have refused to admit that the United States Congress has been extending a secret state of emergency to justify martial law, the World Bank Board of Governors has declared the United States to be in interregnum. On February 10th, I indicted the entire legal profession for covering this fact up. It's interesting that my teleprompter was edited on my computer to delete Justice Scalia's 1979 comments on the Article 5 Convention, and this is what Justice Scalia said. The founders inserted this alternative method of obtaining constitutional amendments because they knew the Congress would be unwilling to give attention to many issues the people are concerned with, particularly those involving restrictions on the federal government's own power. The founders foresaw that, and they provided the convention as a remedy. If the only way to get that convention is to take this minimal risk, then it's a reasonable one. And that's the end of the quote from Justice Scalia. I understand from the story referenced in the subject line in my letter to Neil Gorsuch that you feel close to Justice Scalia. Justice Scalia also wrote this opinion on the validity of the common law, and there's a link to that opinion. Your nomination to fill Justice Scalia's vacant seat on the Supreme Court has put you in the limelight. Your nomination is problematic because the United States is not governed pursuant to the Constitution of 1789, but pursuant to a second secret constitution that the banking cartel foisted on the United States in 1871. Sandra Day O'Connor has suggested that the Supreme Court is the way to bridge this gap and return to the Constitution of 1789. This is, of course, a chicken and egg proposition because the Supreme Court is not operating under the Constitution of 1789. I have had no success in dealing with this problem with Justice Roberts, who ignored the settlement of my case in the U.S. Court of Appeals by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. And that's because Judge Merrick Garland was on the panel that botched my case. It's also dishonest since the fact that the Constitution of 1789 is no longer in effect was covered up along with the corruption in the financial system. Justice Stephen Breyer has also refused to end the cover-up of corruption on the many times that I've contacted him, starting with a discussion that I had with Justice Breyer together with the French ambassador on December 10, 2010. I documented the magnitude of the cover-up of corruption in 2013 with my fax to Judge Traxler, then chair of the Judicial Conference, and I attached that to my letter to Judge Gorsuch, and referring to the fact that I had contacted the state attorneys general, the state governors, and the chief justices of the state Supreme Courts. Since then, and as mentioned in my fax, confidence of U.S. citizens in their judiciary has only deteriorated. The people of the U.S. have not consented to be governed under the Second Secret Constitution of 1871. Now that the Constitution of 1789 has been suspended by the U.S. Congress, the United States is in interregnum. Until the U.S. Constitution of 1789 goes back into force and effect, I vote the U.S. shares on the World Bank and IMF Board of Governors administering the U.S. monetary gold reserves. As I have explained several days ago, the U.S. military are loyal to the U.S. Constitution and are now assisting in a peaceful transition back to the Constitution of 1789 and a global currency reset that will enable the United States to fulfill its treaty obligations to defend Germany and Japan. The likelihood that this happens is greater than 90%. Since the Global Debt Facility also holds a commercial lien on the property of General Dunford Jr., the bottom line is that the U.S. is now governed in interregnum under the common law. There's a recent case that shows the corruption in the courts and monetary system. The case was brought by John Parks Trowbridge, Jr. It can be summarized very briefly. The federal judges are all lying. All United States Department of Justice attorneys and United States district judges and magistrate judges work for the same for-profit corporate employer, the District of Columbia Municipal Corporation. The district courts are just a legislative branch corporate debt collection forum. And I've got a cite to that. It's masquerading as a judicial branch Article III constitutional court. The rest of the United States district courts outside the District of Columbia have no constitutional authority to take territorial and personal jurisdiction. General ignorance of the jurisdictional provisions of the Constitution is what has led to the disappearance of judicial branch Article III constitutional courts and proliferation of legislative branch Article IV territorial courts called United States District Courts. I would like to explain U.S. history in order to explain how this corruption has come about. In October 1781, when the Earl of Cornwallis capitulated to the British East India Company employee George Washington, the name of the Virginia Company was renamed. The new secret corporation was now called the United States of America Corporation and Body Politic Secret Corporation. The terms of the capitulation was that the secret corporation would continue in existence forever. The arrangement that the King or Queen of England would continue to receive 20% of the revenues from the Virginia Company as per Old Charter of 1607, again forever. Without money, civilization could not have had a beginning, and with a diminishing supply, it must languish and, unless relieved, finally perish. At the Christian era, the metallic money of the Roman Empire amounted to 1,800,000. By the end of the 15th century, it had shrunk to less than 200 million. History records no other such disastrous transition as that from the Roman Empire to the Dark Ages. In 1881, President Garfield had a firm grasp of where the problem lay. He said, "Whosoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce." And when you realize that the entire system is very easily controlled one way or another by a few powerful men at the top, you will not have to be told how periods of inflation and depression originate. Within weeks of releasing this statement, President Garfield was assassinated. Your nomination to fill Justice Scalia's vacant seat on the U.S. Supreme Court is part and parcel of the false veneer of legality that is covering up the corruption in the financial system. As Overseer Mandate Trustee of the Global Debt Facility containing the U.S. monetary gold reserves, it's my job to end this corruption through a global currency reset. To this end, I hold commercial liens under the common law on all of the property of those agents of the banking cartel who are preventing me, the United States, and the rest of the world's peoples from accessing the monetary gold reserves of the nations. I also hold a commercial lien on Donald Trump. And I'd like to end the segment, but I encourage you to look at what other information I've put on the teleprompter for you. Thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. All of humanity is united in a coalition for the rule of law to exchange the Federal Reserve notes and other fractional reserve currencies in a global currency reset. Media is simply lying to perpetuate the corruption and to fool the unwary. Donald Trump's inauguration was simply banking cartel propaganda and nothing more. Stay tuned as the global currency reset rolls out. Thank you.